here's how we do that, kind of like that model of that thinking. So you've got this problem, and I wrote down that formula, right? And what you could do is you could say, okay, this is how I look at this problem. And if you say that, people start like, okay, how does she do it? How is the teacher going to address this? And then you start just thinking out loud. Okay, M1. Well, what does M stand for? Well, M is mass. And 1 is for the first object, whatever. And I can pick which object that is, or whatever. So M1, well, the mass is this. So that's my M1, so I can write that down. And then my V1. Well, it's moving at this velocity. Okay, so that's my V, and it's for this object, so there's my V1. And then you write it, and then it's boom. And then, because what you were doing is you were asking them, okay, what's M1? And only like 3 or 4 of your kids were answering. And maybe because, like you said, they can't make that connection. So what you can do is you can help them show that. And then you can be like, okay, well, this is my mass. This is object 1, and you can just think object 1 and then object 2, and we just model that, and we just show them, okay, so this is here, and then this is here. And then you just label that for them. And you kind of show them, okay, and then you did a really good job as you were doing this, but then because you know some of your kids struggle with algebra, right? Like those basic rules of anything times 0 is what? Everybody knows. Well, so when you were going through that, one of the things I noticed is you did it on the second half of the equation. Like you asked that question, 4 times 0 would be 0, and it just cancels out. So then you're left with this. On the other side of the equation, you did it without saying it. So like some of the kids were like sitting there like, I didn't get that. How'd she do that? And that's okay. Like that's fine, because you're not a math teacher, right? You're a science teacher, you're a physics teacher. But that's just one of those ways that you can model that for them, at least in the first problem, right? Because then in that next problem, okay, now they've understood your thinking, they understand how you look at it, and it'll help them make those connections. Okay, because you did that, and I think that could help you. It would also maybe increase some of that participation from your students, because then you could be like, okay, now what? And so instead of maybe getting through 4, you're getting 7, 8, 9, 10 of your students actually saying it out loud, what it would be. Because I like how you do that. I like how you go through that, but just try to make those conscious efforts of like showing how you model that thinking. Because you're learning this content too. And you had to make those connections. And so because you've been that learner, you know that experience, if you model it and say it for them too, it'll help some of those kids that you're working with too. I've noticed that, and I think that'll be really helpful for some of your students. Because I was right with you, no problem. Like we got this. 4 times 0 that's 0. I don't have to worry about that. And boom, okay. And so at that point, like, so some point in the equation is like 12.8 divided by whatever. So I was already there. But I could see, and that's a common thing because we're strong. We've had years of experience and practice with it. Sometimes we forget that when we're teaching. And so I do this in my class. Like I'll sit there and I have to catch myself. Like I have to slow myself down a lot too, because I'm like, I gotta get to this. It's like, oh, I gotta slow down.
I noticed like in my morning classes I was going, I guess, kind of fast because I was trying, and then in my afternoon classes I noticed like maybe I'm going too fast, and I'm like, does anyone have any questions? Everyone would stay quiet, but I look around for confused faces, and then I was like, okay, let me re-explain and redo it. So yeah, I did notice that.
And that's good. And this is one of those awesome things about being a teacher, right? A high school teacher. Because if you're another grade, it doesn't work. But as a high school teacher, you're going to teach that same lesson multiple times. And you're going to catch your mistakes in your first couple of periods. And then your last classes of the day are going to be way better than your first ones. And that's okay, right? We have another opportunity to teach them, and work with them again, because I do that, right? My first classes are,
Yeah.
let's see what we can do, especially if we're trying something new,
Yeah.
right? And it's like, okay, well, that didn't work, but if I do it this way, it'll be better and helpful. And that's a part of the growth, right? So that's a good thing.
Yeah.
And you're not, like, there's nothing wrong with that. And so I guess just the next question, because you talked about this, and you did a really good job of actively monitoring. Like, you do a really good job. You do a better job than I do most times, honestly. So how does student engagement impact student performance?
I think it impacts it a lot. Like, I saw it with the previous project that we were doing. If your group isn't like willing to like help out or something, it discourages the other person to even try. And I have such a hard time sometimes grouping students because I have some classes where they just don't talk, like, and it's a little bit like I don't know how to like help them out. But if I see a group that's not like participating, actively engaging, I have to like step in, like, okay, what is this, like, because they won't do it on their own, because I don't know, I guess they're like antisocial or something. But I think it totally, like, if a group member isn't participating, or the group is not helping, the other person's not gonna do anything either.
And you had a really good job, like, you did a really good job monitoring and doing this and stepping in. There were a couple of groups that it was obvious they were off topic, but you did a great job of recognizing them early and redirecting as well too, which was good. That's a really good strength of yours that you have. So keep doing that, because that's awesome.
Thank you.
All right, so now comes the fun part. So one thing to improve, because you'll notice I did a 3, 2, 1 right there, because that's one thing that you would like to improve on, that we can kind of brainstorm here together on how we could do this.
I feel like sometimes the way I have them take notes is not as effective. But then I don't know like what's the in between, because if I just give them like a paper where they just fill in the blanks, like they're just gonna fill in the blanks and like that's it. They're not gonna like pay attention. And sometimes when the notes are like too long, they're just kind of like. And my thing is like I have them write it down, because once you write it, you're like reading it to yourself, and then you're also hearing me say it. But I still don't know like what's like the in between that I'm still struggling with.
No, and that's good.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a good thing, and that's a difficult thing to try to help students do. Now, I noticed on your slides, you've got certain things highlighted. So tell me about your structure. So how do you currently have your students taking notes? Like what have you taught them? What have you structured them?
So I have them, like, they need to be updating like their table of contents, and then I just have them, anything that's highlighted, it's important, it's gonna be on a test, so I have them just write that. And then for like math examples, sometimes the wording is too long, so I just tell them, I just need you to work out the problem. But that's like mostly it.
Okay. And how did you come up with this?
I just came up with it.
Okay. So you haven't seen it modeled or anything like that either? Or?
Well, actually my when I was student teaching, my mentor, she would do that. She would just highlight the important parts, and I wouldn't do that. And then I learned from her, like, because if you just have like a whole thing full of words, they're just gonna be like, so just highlight the important things that you want them to write down. I'm like, okay, so that's how I got the highlighting part. Sometimes like if there's like a lot of diagrams, I print out